Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for another Ask the Experts virtual workshop. I am Dr. Pamela Hurst Della Pietra, President and founder of Children and Screens, Institute of Digital Media and Child Development, your host for this series on digital media and child development. We will be holding these workshops weekly throughout the summer. For those of you who have joined us for the first time, Children and Screens advances the science of children and media by funding interdisciplinary research grants and convening meetings and congresses of clinicians and researchers. And we provide evidence-based guidance to the public about what the science says. During the pandemic, Children and Screens is also funding research projects investigating how screens are helping families and friends to stay connected and how increased screen time may be impacting children and screens during and after the crisis. This summer is unlike any other than we have ever experienced, and you are undoubtedly struggling with the idea of unknown vacation plans and gatherings, more months of limited outside help with childcare, and not being able to get out and about with your little ones. Part of this struggle might include guilt about giving your little one too much screen time, an effort to limit digital device use without knowing how or when to do so. If you're struggling with device-related challenges, know that you're not alone. We're here to help. Along with our esteemed moderator and 4 incredible panelists, there are hundreds of people on this Zoom call from many states and countries, all in the same boat. We hope that the conversation today will ignite further discussion among families about what's working and what's not, and we hope to give you ideas to strengthen family connections and aid healthy infants, toddlers, and young children's development. I'd like to extend a big thank you in advance to our extraordinary panel of experts for sharing their expertise today. Our panelists have reviewed the questions you submitted and will answer as many as they can. If you have any additional questions during the workshop, please type them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'll answer as many questions as time permits. We are recording today's workshop and will upload a video to YouTube. You'll receive a link to our YouTube channel tomorrow. You can find videos of our past webinars on our YouTube channel as well. It is now my great pleasure to introduce our moderator, Rebecca Parlakian, who is a renowned expert on early childhood development, who shares insights with families around the world in her work as Senior Director of Programs at the national nonprofit organization 0 to 3, focusing on the healthy development of very young children. We're so pleased to have Mrs. Parlakian with us today. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here and very honored to join this incredible group of panelists. Our speakers today are going to explore screen use in the context of COVID-19, where, as you all know, social distancing, mask wearing, and staying in much more than usual has become our new normal. We'll begin today with a presentation from Dr. Kathy Hirsch-Pasek, who will share what young children from birth to 5 need in the early years and how parents can support their healthy development. Dr. Hirsch-Pasek is the director of the Infant Language Laboratory at Temple University and recipient of the American Psychological Society's Award for a Lifetime of Outstanding Contributions to Applied Psychological Research. We are so very pleased to have you with us here today, Kathy.
Thank you so much. It is truly a pleasure to be here today. And I'm just thrilled, Pam, that you put these together for parents. So thank you so much. It's such a gift to the community, and I'm happy to be part of your community. Now, Pam had asked me to start out by giving you a drive-by 5-minute course in child development. So here you go, Child Development 101. And I'm going to focus here on the first 3 years. So the first 6 months, I mean, you remember those kids? They were kind of random as a newborn. They were all over the place. And then all of a sudden, things got a little more organized. And by 3 months of age, you saw them swiping at things. And you saw them reach at 4 months of age and could even pull themselves into a sitting position by 6 months of age. Does that mean they can actually even start to look at a screen? In language, they start out by crying a lot, most intensely at 2 months of age. So if you can get to 3 months of age and get that smile, that social smile, you have won. Did you know that you can have a conversation, a back and forth conversation with a baby who's just 2.5 months old, 3 months old? Amazing. And they laugh at 3 months of age. God, what a pleasure that is. Socially, they notice you. They follow you. They know you're different than any other object. Now we move to the second half of the first year. They're 6 going on 12 months. In motor, they've pulled themselves up to a stand. By 12 and 13 months, many of them are actually taking their first steps. Language, well, did you know that at 6 or 7 months, they actually recognize the words mommy and daddy? That they're starting to babble. And you may notice those babbles start out very general and then they become more language specific by 8 months of age. First words pop out at around 12 months. Fine motor, they're banging cubes together. In fact, they're banging anything you put in their little hands. And they can even put a block in a cup at 14 months in. But don't ask them to take the block out of the cup. Out of is a lot harder than in. Socially, they're trying to feed themselves. Now they can play patty cake with you. And they even wave bye-bye when your friends come to visit. God, that makes them feel so sociable. Is it possible that they can pick up some of those cues on FaceTime? 12 to 14 months, they're running, and then they run. It seems to me they don't stop running until they're about 4 or 5 years of age, and they can even kick a ball at 18 months. So if you have a budding soccer player, get ready. Language, 18 months. What's up? What's up? They're asking for the names for things. They're putting 2 words together, and they even have a language spurt sometime around 19 to 21 months of age, which is overwhelming and gets us so excited because they learn, are you ready for this? 9 new words a day. Fine motor, they're now scribbling. That means they can hold, crudely, notice it's in this position, but they can hold some sort of a pencil or a pen. They can build a tower, and they can drink from a cup and play with a ball. 24 to 36, oh my God, they're so sophisticated. They can get dressed with help at 24, brush their teeth at 30, run in the motor. In language, pretend play starts to enter. They're telling stories and having full conversations. In the fine motor, they're drawing figures, some puzzles, and socially, they're really getting it together and can even do some very primitive puzzles. Now at 4 and 5, they're your friends. They walk around with you. They can recognize your friends. They can talk to them. And yes, they can even do some of that on FaceTime. And as many of you already know, they recognize the familiar figures on Sesame Street and Paw Patrol. Or was that Frozen 2 and Frozen 2 and Frozen 2? All right, let me go to the second part, the power of social interaction. Hope I'm still okay on time, Rebecca. In the power of social interaction, the first 3 years are about people. People need people. That may be the most important thing I tell you today. People need people. And little guys need real, honest to God, back and forth conversations and human interaction, even more than older kids do. Which means that plopping them in front of something, not a good idea. But having them converse, even if it's something like FaceTime, is actually okay. And there's scientific data on that. Not all the time. I wouldn't want to hire an online babysitter. They wouldn't do real good at diapering your child. But they can have conversations and they can recognize their grandparents and aunts and uncles. But if people learn from people, it means we really do have to limit things a little bit in the early years with respect to our screen time. We can come back to those questions in a bit, but I will tell you, we actually now know the brain mechanisms that permit brain growth based on the back and forth conversation. And finally, tips for the summer. Well, I would imagine that the summer for you, as it is for me, is just the same old in a COVID-19 world. I frankly don't notice much of a difference between March and June. I can't even tell which day it is anymore. And for those of you who are parents out there who've moved your office in the house, your kids in the house, their schooling in the house, you're my heroes. I don't know how you're doing it. So my advice to you is to let them be bored. They do not have to be entertained at all times. And if they learned how to be bored, that may be the most important thing you teach them during COVID and during summer. Fill your time. We later on in life call that bosses rather than worker bees. Secondly, take your vacation if you're going on a vacation. Just kind of take it in your backyard. We were taking the kids. I have two grandchildren, one who's 2 and one who's 5, and they're very disappointed about not going to Scotland. So we're having the Highland Games and making shortbread cookies in our own house. Finally, tips for looking for apps for the older ones. Look for things that are active, not passive, engaging, not distracting, things that are meaningful to the kid, not disjointed, things that are socially interactive and prompt social interaction, and things that are joyful. Follow that tweet, active, engaged, meaningful, socially interactive, and joyful, and I promise you, you'll find the best stuff on the market. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I really struck me that notion of people needing people, and that the first 2 years really are all about people and human relationships. I also love that idea of, just knowing that children, toddlers are learning 9 words a day brings home how important those interactions really are.
Yeah.
So, we've received a lot of questions before today's gathering, and questions are coming in. So why don't we take one right now, and then we'll return to questions afterwards. So we got one from a parent saying, how can we encourage children to play less on a screen? Do you have any tips for that?
I really do. I will tell you that it was actually by my daughter-in-law and son considered somewhat impossible to get the 5 and 2-year-old off the screen. By the way, we're about to have one heck of a lightning storm, so I hope I don't lose you, lose power. But one of the things you do is limit it and don't have the screens. Now, I know that sounds almost crazy in today's world, but my kids were thrilled. And all of a sudden, they found out they had blocks. And all this.
We may have lost Kathy because of the storm. So, I think what we were hearing from Kathy is really that proximity to the screen is going to really bring about more demands for the screen. So by removing it from the children's setting, we create opportunity for them to discover what else is available to them to explore and play with. So I'm sure we'll hear more from Kathy later as she reconnects, but for now, I'm going to move on. Dr. Heather Krikorian is our next speaker. Dr. Krikorian is based at the University of Wisconsin-Madison at the School of Human Ecology, and she's going to offer us an overview of what we know about young children and screen time, specifically in terms of healthy and unhealthy digital media use for young children. Dr. Krikorian's research focuses on cognitive development and media impact, and her current projects explore the extent to which infants and toddlers can learn from video and the impact that television has on young children, particularly as it relates to parent-child interaction, which I know is top of mind for so many parents this summer. So welcome, Dr. Krikorian.
Hi, thanks everybody. And thanks for the great introduction, and thanks for joining me. And thanks to Kathy for the great intro to our panel. So I was really tasked with talking to you today about what the science says about children and screens. So I'll be focusing on what we know about kids and screens and what kids should or should not be doing when they're on screens. And I know the other panelists today will be talking a lot about what they're doing and what they should be doing when they're not on screens. So I want to start with just a few key take-home points to give context to everything that I'm going to share with you today. The first is that this is not normal, and you don't need me to tell you that. You all know that we're not living under normal conditions right now. So all of the research that I'm going to share with you today about what we know about kids and screens should be taken in that context. So we can talk an awful lot about what kids should and should not be doing in an ideal situation. We are not in an ideal situation, and I can't emphasize that enough. The second point that's related is to be kind to yourself. So I feel like part of my job in this role is to forgive parents for not doing what they think they should be doing all of the time. Again, this is not normal, and we're all doing the best that we can. And the third main point here is that the most important thing for kids is that they feel safe and loved. Screens don't necessarily have to have anything to do with that. Screens could even help with that in some cases, and I'll talk more about that later. If you're ensuring that your kids feel safe and loved, you're doing just fine. Okay, with that said, I'm going to talk about kids and screens a little bit. So one thing to know, what we know about kids and screens, these numbers are based on a brand new study my colleagues and I just published in the journal Pediatrics. We know that parents are not always aware of their kids' screen time. And so part of my job today is just to help parents become a little bit more aware. So in our study, we had asked parents how much their kids use their mobile devices. In this case, these were preschool age children. And we also used a new app that we developed to sense the mobile device use, so actually track objectively how much the device was being used. And we found that parents both over and underestimated. So you might think everybody underestimates how much they use screens. The reality is just over a third of parents underestimated how much their kids use their mobile device, and just over a third overestimated. Only about 30% of parents were accurate, and I use accurate kind of broadly to be sort of in the right ballpark. So parents are often unaware of what their kids are doing. The other thing we know about kids and screens falls in these three buckets that a lot of folks call the 3 C's. And I'm going to talk about each of those just for a quick minute or two. The 3 C's refer to context, and that means a whole bunch of things, but it means things like, are kids using screens alone or with other people? Are those other people just kind of passively watching with them, or are they actively engaging and talking about what they're doing? Is it the foreground activity? So is the media use actually what kids are doing, or is it in the background, what we might call secondhand screen exposure? So it's just there and they're not actively using it. And also, what's the larger context that kids are in? So the impact of screen time on young kids will depend on things like, what else would those kids be doing? Do they have access to high quality educational resources in and out of the home? Do they have safe, clean spaces to play outside of the home? So the extent to which screen time is good or bad for kids depends on all of these different context factors. The second C is content, and I'll talk about that more. You probably know what I mean by this. The most important thing we mean by this is it age-appropriate educational content? Is it violent content or otherwise potentially harmful content? Is it somewhere in the middle? And then the third C is the individual child. So kids will have different effects depending on who they are as people. And that depends partly on the child's age and abilities and other kinds of things that I'll mention later. So just to quickly talk a little bit about the research on context, I want to give you a couple of examples, kind of side-by-side comparisons that I think about a lot when I think about context. So here you see 2 different family play situations. I like to focus a lot on the activity and the goals of that activity rather than the device that's being used. So in this case, we see 2 examples of a family game session. In one case that uses a video game system, in one case it uses a board game system. In both cases, they're interactive family play contexts. Here's another one for you, a family shared reading context with a toddler. So in one case, we're using a print book. In the other case, it might be an electronic book on a screen. And the research tells us that parents can engage in very similar behaviors when they're reading books to little ones, whether that book is on a screen or in print. So again, think about the context and what is the goal of that activity and how can you engage in that activity to make it a positive time for babies or children, regardless of the device being used. All right, that was the first C, context. The second C is content. I already mentioned this, and I'm sure you know exactly where this is going. Very few studies, you might see a lot of headlines about screen time, kind of broadly defined for infants and young kids. Most of the research suggests that that's not the right question. Talking about time isn't really the best way to understand the effects of screens on young kids. What's much more important is content. So very few studies you might read about in the news talk about actually measure the content of the screen time, but those that do invariably find that content matters. So educational, age-appropriate content, and I use Sesame Street here as an example because it's the show that has received by far the most research attention over the decades. But there are many, many, many other examples of high quality content for kids. But educational content is typically associated with positive outcomes, whether that's language development, attention development, lots of other metrics of child development and outcomes. Educational content tends to be associated with positive outcomes, if any. So some studies find if it's educational content, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't affect outcomes for good or ill. Other studies find educational content can be positive for development. The second category I have up here, I call entertainment, and that's just broadly defined. I was trying to find a good image for this and picked a circus. This is not to pick on circuses in any way, but I tried to come up with an image that would illustrate entertainment that doesn't necessarily have an educational goal. It's just meant to be entertaining. This kind of content in the research is associated with sometimes negative outcomes for young kids, and again, if any. So sometimes just plain old entertainment without an educational goal doesn't predict good or bad outcomes. It's just kind of neutral. Other times it can be negative depending on the study. And then the third category is violent content. And as you might expect, in any study that captures violent content as a specific category for young kids, typically finds negative outcomes associated with that content. Okay, the third C is the child themselves, the individual child. So as you know, children are people and people are different from each other, and the extent to which kids differ will determine the impact of screen time on them. Age is one of the biggest ones that has actually been studied. Kathy mentioned this a little bit already. So I've divided the first two panels into age for infants 0 to 2 years old, and then preschoolers 2 to 5. The research pretty clearly shows that infants learn best from people. They learn relatively little from screens. So screens are not likely to have very much benefit for babies, especially if it's not really socially interactive with other people in the room. Preschoolers, on the other hand, can clearly learn a whole bunch of things from screens, and that could be good or bad depending on what they're learning, but they definitely can learn from screens. They're likely to learn a whole lot more if they have some support from other people, like their parents who are watching with them. And then I just added a third panel for other differences, and we know a lot less about these kinds of things. Research is only just starting to happen. But we know that kids' individual abilities, their temperament, their self-regulation, inhibitory control, all of those things might determine whether screen time is more or less effective or harmful for different kids. One of the take-home points I'd want to make is to think about a balanced media diet. So I've talked to you about the 3 C's. We know that media effects vary a lot depending on content and context and child characteristics. When I talk to parents about screen time, I often talk about a balanced media diet. So I'm sure everybody has seen something like this. Full disclosure, I don't know if this is the current recommendation, but you've all seen things like this that divide the plate up into different types of foods and what we might want more or less of. And we can think of a child's day the same way. So if you think about what you want your child's day to look like or your child's week to look like this summer, what kinds of activities do you want them to have in their day? Sleep cannot be emphasized enough. Sleep is going to be a very big part of a healthy child's day, and that is likely to not involve screens in any way. The research is pretty clear on that one. Mealtime. So you might want to make sure you have some kind of focused, screen-free family meal times throughout the day. Those things are really important. Physical activity. There are clear guidelines about the kinds of activity kids can get. That doesn't have to be outside, that can happen inside. It doesn't always even have to be screen-free. So we talk a lot about screen time being sedentary. That doesn't have to be the case. So there are plenty of opportunities out there for kids to dance along to a video or engage in some other physical activity prompted in a game. So those examples might be few and far between, but there are some good ones out there. So if you're really at a loss for how to get screen time on a rainy summer day, how to get physical activity on a rainy summer day, there might be some opportunities out there. Outdoor time is important, even if it's just sitting outside. We know that sunlight is good for healthy vision, for example. So getting some time outside might be important. Some focused one-on-one interaction time that's screen-free, also really important. Playtime, and Kathy already said, kids can be bored, that's okay. Just giving kids time to play with the objects they have in the house. It could be pots and pans, it could be cool blocks to play with, but playtime is super important for infants and young kids. And then also I encourage parents to forgive themselves and take a break every day. I genuinely believe we become better parents when we have a break once in a while. For infants, that's probably nap time, as many of you know. It's a good time for parents to take a break. For older preschoolers, that might involve a little bit of screen time. And as long as that's a small slice of the pie throughout the day, it's okay to take a break, especially if it's high quality educational content for young kids. Some other quick points about a balanced media diet. I already mentioned selecting good content. There are some great resources out there for parents. Two that I'll mention, there are others as well, but two that I always refer to are commonsensemedia.org. They have great lists, like recommendations for parents with kids of different ages, depending on the educational goal you have or the social goal you have. And what I like about Common Sense Media also is they have tips for what parents can do or talk about with their kids with different media products. PBSkids.org is another great one for that. So the content is great, and there are excellent resources for parents for activities they can do to enhance any educational goals in the real world. And that's super important for young kids. The second suggestion here is to monitor usage. That partly means you can use built-in tools in mobile devices to monitor how much kids are using the device. And then related to that would be to establish some screen-free zones, and that refers to times and or places. Bedtime, the hour before bedtime, dinner time, and in terms of places, the bedroom is a common one. The research is pretty clear on this one. So to the extent possible, keeping screens away from bedtime, mealtime, and out of the bedroom, that's really good for young kids. And then the last thing I want to mention here about the balanced media diet is to be aware of secondhand screen time. So in my research, we tend to call this background TV. It's also been called technoference, so interference from technology. The research is pretty clear that this can be harmful for infants and young kids. And it's not possible to eliminate this 100% of the time for most families, especially in the current moment. But just be aware of it and make sure you can carve out times in the day when there are no screens around. The last point I wanted to make, if time permits, is to talk a little bit about transitioning away from screens. And I wanted to include this because so many of the questions that our attendees submitted in advance asked about how to take the device away or how to transition to less screen time as we're allowed to go outside more. So I pulled together just a couple of tips that I have for that, and I think that's going to come up later in the panel as well. But these are just a few tips that I came up with to help parents transition away from screens. The first is it's just so important with infants and young kids to establish consistent routines. So if kids know what to expect in the day, they know when screen time is allowed, where screen time is allowed, and when and where it's not, and that's consistent and predictable, that's one of your best tools that you have. The second suggestion I have that I don't often see come up in conversations around screen time is to choose meaningful transition points. So a lot of families will have time-based limits on screen time, so 30 minutes a day or an hour per day. And that's okay to have that kind of limit. But I think you're going to be more successful transitioning away from the screen if you have meaningful transition points. So maybe it's the end of an episode for a TV show. Maybe it's once an achievement is reached in an app or digital game. So having that meaningful transition point is more likely to result in a smooth transition than just cutting things off at a certain time point. There's at least one study showing that kind of a time-obsessed end marker, like counting down, you have 5 minutes left, you have 1 minute left, that might actually increase negative behavior for kids because it just increases stress about the end of that pleasurable activity. So having a good predictable chunk of content that kids can do might be helpful. Third tip, reward healthy behavior. And this goes without saying for any parenting strategy. Make sure you're not inadvertently rewarding the behavior you want to get rid of. So if your child gladly hands over the tablet at the end of tablet time, that's good behavior to be rewarded. So make sure that your rewarding patterns with your kids are rewarding the behaviors that you want. And the fourth tip is to provide attractive alternatives. So just telling kids to turn the TV off or take the tablet away without giving them some cool other options to do, that's going to be less successful than saying, now, would you like to do this great thing or that great thing? Giving kids attractive options to do afterwards. So in closing, I just want to pull up this first slide I shared just to remind you, these are not normal circumstances. Please be kind to yourself and just make sure your kids feel safe and loved. You're doing okay.
Thank you, Heather. That was really helpful. I know for me as a parent, I'm in the midst of having these discussions and finding this balance. And that's really why I loved your frame of the balanced media diet. It really helps us think about where media might fall and the idea of making media sort of the last and not first resort when we're suggesting activities. Children in Screens also has some great tips for parents in their website if folks on the webinar today want to check out and learn a little more. We have had a number of questions come through just about this whole question of choosing content. And there's so many products and programs that, say that they are educational in nature. So do you have any thoughts about how as a parent we curate and screen those and really figure out what is high quality content?
Yeah, it's a great question. And as every parent knows, this is so much harder in the digital age because we talk a lot about the digital Wild West. So in terms of television programs, especially broadcast TV, there are clear places we can point families to, and they can be pretty confident there's going to be good content there. I mentioned PBS Kids, for example. In the App Store, for instance, there's essentially no regulation or curation, and creators can tag their content as educational for young kids without meeting any criteria at all. They can just tag it as educational. And there's research showing the vast majority of those things tagged as educational don't do the kinds of things that research says are likely to be educational. The kinds of things I suggest parents do are use resources. You are not alone in this. There are great resources online, free resources that provide great advice about how to choose good content and what content might be good for kids at different ages, and what parents can do to extend those lessons outside of screen time. So I mentioned a couple. Some general principles that parents can think about, and Kathy mentioned very similar things earlier. You definitely want content for young kids that is focused on a very specific goal without a lot of distracting bells and whistles that pull away from it. So I saw some parent questions and that came in earlier about ebooks. So the research on ebooks is pretty clear that very simple ebooks that look a lot like print books but on a screen, we can use those the same way we use print books to some good effect. The kind of ebooks that have lots of games and bells and whistles and animations, those tend to distract from the story. So look for content that really focuses on a lesson or a story without a lot of distracting things. I don't want to talk too much about content, so I'm happy to talk more, Rebecca, if you want to.
No, but I think that's really helpful in, guiding us to be just informed consumers as parents as we approach, the App Store and other sources of content. So thank you. Next, we're going to switch gears just a little bit, and we're so pleased to welcome Louise Dorrit from Melbourne, Australia, where it is both winter and the middle of the night. So we really appreciate you being here. Louise has worked in the early years profession for over 30 years, having taught the Bachelor of Early Childhood Education at a number of universities in Victoria. She also assisted in the setup of the first Victorian bush kinder and worked in the bush setting for about 2 years. So Louise, we are just thrilled to hear you share more about nature-based learning and the development of resilience, as well as some ideas for what we can do right now to really nurture and enrich our children's playtime. Oh, Louise, I think you're on mute, so.
Here I am. Thank you, Rebecca. Well, it's 2 a.m. here in Melbourne, Australia, and I'm on Wurundjeri land of the Kulin Nation, and they're the Aboriginal people that have been here for 60,000 years, and they have taught us about play and just real authentic play with just what nature provides. And now it's a question to all of you out there. What were you doing when you were a child? Have a think about what you were playing with. Think about who you were playing with. Now in Australia, we have fabulous technology and I can actually hear. If you just call out, I can hear everything that you say. I can hear you. Yes, you were climbing trees and you were riding the bikes. That's right. You were on the playgrounds with the seesaws and with the whizzy dizzies and that's right, and playing with the mud and the sand and the dirt and with your neighbors and your siblings. And what were the rules? The rules were that you came home when the street lights were on or when your parents, when it was dinner time. And as we know, what are children doing now? Even before COVID, they're on the iPad, the iPad, the iPod, all of those. And so about 10 years ago, another preschool teacher, a kindergarten teacher, Doug Farger, he thought, this is getting ridiculous. Children aren't doing what they should be doing, just playing, which is a bit what Kathy was talking about, the development before. What children need is to do what children always used to do, as in climbing the trees and running and jumping and playing with the balls, and without even thinking about the screen. So he set up the first ever bush kinder, and that was in 2011. And it was now in Victoria, there are more than 180 bush kinders. So children are dropped off at 9 in the morning and picked up at 12 without any toys, no resources, just playing with what nature provides. And so children were climbing trees. And of course, there's rules. I mean, risks are not eliminated, they're managed, because then children can self-assess the risk. So children can climb trees. However, if the branch is wobbly, they shouldn't climb it. If the branch is thinner than your wrist, well, then they don't climb it. So that means that children actually self-assess the risk, like what we did when we were young. And of course, they played with sticks, and we had rules around sticks, that you can walk with sticks, but you can't run with sticks. And of course, there's mud and running and jumping. And interestingly, the first time that the children were dropped off at Bush Kinder, they appeared bored because they're used to, and Kathy and Heather mentioned this too before, they're used to stuff, too many toys. They're used to bells and whistles. And so when you strip that away, they actually have to play. And so the first few weeks we played hide and seek with them because there was no swings, no slides. What were they going to do? But then research shows from the forest schools in Europe that if you go to the same place every week, well, then that becomes their space, their sense of belonging, their identity. So then we saw them just playing by themselves or with the others. And so and as Kathy said earlier, children should be allowed to get bored, because then, they can use their imagination and be creative. And that's so crucial. So this is pure play. What is play? Play is child's work. So play provides opportunities for children to learn as they discover, they create, they improvise, they talk, they role play, they experience conflicts, but then they work it out. If, you know, play is a context for learning, for which children organize and they make sense of their world, you know, and it's about engaging actively with people, objects, and representations. So, and the most important, let me just get to the next slide. So the most important foundation for children's life is play. And let me just, uno momento, just, okay, I'm just stuck here. Okay, there we are. So the most important foundation for children's healthy development is play, and the benefits carry over into adult life. Now, we don't know the jobs that our children will be doing. They haven't even been invented yet, but what we do know is what children need, regardless of what job they do. And what they need is resilience. They need curiosity. They need effective communication. They need to be able to get on with others. And they need social emotional learning and also self-regulation. So to be able to self-regulate the emotions. And so the best way to teach this is through play. And play it's open-ended. So it's no right or wrong. As Heather was talking about the bells and whistles, you don't need that. It's just as these two children are playing. I've taken all these photos. So they're just playing with pots and pans. So think when we're talking about play, open-ended, no right or wrong. Like a puzzle is fantastic, but it's not actual play because it's closed. If a child put their puzzle on their head, well, then that's play. So it's also about child's work. And this is defining play. So open-ended, as I said, enjoyable. So not for the adult to say, I want you to do this. It's pretend, it's active and voluntary. So that's intrinsic, comes from the child. It's also process orientated. So we look at the doing, not the end product, and self-motivating. So you can see in these pictures, there's dress-ups as play because it's open-ended, and mud and sand and water. That is the most beneficial experience for children to play because it's open-ended, it's no right or wrong, and it's children's world. You don't need the adult to be saying, oh, what are you doing? Oh, it looks like you're making a cake. Oh, what kind of cake you're making? This is where you don't need to step in. But children aren't used to playing by themselves, and that's why they say to the parents, I'm bored. Whereas if children are used to it, well, then they get caught up in their own world. So now these are the stages of play. Mildred Parton taught us this, almost a century ago, and we still teach this in uni. So we start off, there's many stages of play, but I've just chosen 4 for you. So we start off with solitary play, which is infants, and that is children just play by themselves. And as you can see, this picture here, this is inside, and I've just got a tray with just sand and just stones and animals. And the next one is parallel play, and this is, say, for roughly 2 to 3. And that means that children are playing by themselves, but they're playing with alongside other children. So this means that you need duplicate materials. So instead of 1 truck between 2, you actually need 2 trucks, because children of that age usually, and I'm generalizing, can't find it very difficult to share. So parallel play is working alongside each other. Then you've got associative play, which is roughly around 3. So they're starting to work together. So this is children having a tea set and in home corner. And then cooperative play, so from 4 on, and that is when they're playing cooperatively and there's rules involved. They have to negotiate. They could be role playing. And you can see that all of these skills we need to be, for our healthy development, to be a healthy adult. And so these are some ideas that that you at home can do, so parents can do. So sheets and cushions just for cubby houses. We've got the boxes and the teddies, and a box there also with outdoor home corner stuff, just boxes with tablecloths and dolls, etc. And children need to be outside as a few hours a day. That's for health. In Australia, from our Elizabeth Murdoch Institute, we have a lot of children with allergies, and research shows that we have a vitamin D deficiency. And to get vitamin D, we need to be outside, and regardless of weather. In Bush Kinder, it's been going now for 10 years, and it's only been closed once because we believe that there's no such thing as inappropriate weather, it's inappropriate clothing. And the only time it was closed was because of an electrical storm. So children need to be outside for, at least a few hours a day. So, and this is, my children are all old now, they're all in their 20s, but because I was qualified in early childhood before I had children, I maintained, I believed in play from the word dot. And so what Heather and Kathy were talking about, the screen, we never had the television in the family room where our kitchen was. That was intentional. It was purposeful, because then there wasn't that distraction. So, and we always had a desk or an old table right next to the bench in the kitchen. They don't want to be playing in their playroom 3 doors down the hallway by themselves. They want to be there with you while you're cooking. So we had the table, and we always had different things on the table and in the shelves. It's only for about 10, 12 years of your life. Then you can put the adult furniture back. And also we had an area for the floor as well. So we had the table and the floor. And outside, we always had water and sand. So this was our pool back then, and just plastic items in the pool. And they learn so much through the digging and the pool and all elements of play. And cubby houses. So these are, that's my 30-year-old daughter there and her friends. And so as you can see, all of these resources, they don't cost money. It's just stuff around the house. And then you leave them be, and then they start creating and imagining and using all their cognitive development and role playing. And it's best that you don't, unless someone's, scratched an eye out, you don't need to interfere. We hover too much. Children should be able to make mistakes in their play, because that's how they learn. That's how they build their resilience. That's how they work out how to do it. And so this is inside, just stuff. So you can see my son Harry at the top with all of his toys, and my other son Joe with the little crazy bones and setting them up. And he's now Harry's now studying architecture, and Joe's in construction management. And I'm sure that all of that sorting and all those little pieces, lining them up, and with the colors and the sizes, that contributed. And of course, dress ups is another fantastic thing, just to have an old case of clothes. That's my daughter at the top, the top photo. And because play was intrinsic in the children's lives, the friends that used to come over, they just dressed up as well. Even, and you can see the bottom photo, they're quite old there. But it's just, all of this is just child's work. And so for parents, the ideas, the pots and pans, the water play, dancing, going, the dolls, the sand pit, the cubbies, and the blocks. and also going to the park. I know in Australia we're all still in lockdown, but we can go to the parks. All the playgrounds they're all covered over, but the parks we can go to. So that means that children, it's extraordinary. The parks have never been full like this. There's families now rolling the ball and kicking the ball and running and jumping, and the dogs are getting so many walks. And I've been chatting to families and they've been saying, oh, I'm over the school, I'm over the kindergarten and the preschool. They keep sending me, emailing me all these sheets to do. You know, we've got to color the letter C, we've got to do this, I'm over it. And I said, you've got to tell them, no, stop sending these worksheets. Just playing gives you all the learning and all the teaching that a child needs. I mean, they learn, you know, every possible learning area, math, science, emotional learning, language, literacy, all through dressing up, cooking, dancing, reading, jumping. Just, you play. When children play, they get every single thing that they need. And as I said, songs. So I've just got a song for you. And of course, I'm putting on my gloves, of course, because that's what we're doing. And can you all, I've got 300 pairs here. Can everyone, Laura, can you put yours on? Heather, can you put yours on? Can everyone else? Yes, Rebecca, can you put yours on? Okay, all of you parents at home and students, can you do this, please? I have 10 little fingers, they all belong to me. I can make them do things. Would you like to see? I can shut them up tight, open them up wide, clap them together and make them hide. Put them up high, put them down low, fold them like this and fold them so. And of course we can't not do a song about masks, can we? So, and these are what you can do with children. And as you know, Kathy said, it's about interaction, doing it with your infant, with your fetus in utero. You just do it. Sing, sing, sing. So I've got this on here. This is my mask. Now, can everyone, I can only see Heather, Laura, and Rebecca, but could you please just do this, please? Here we go. Old Joan Muddlecombe lost her mask. She looked everywhere and then she asked, where's my mask? Where do I begin? Silly Joan Muddlecombe, you've got it on your chin. Now, this is how you wear it. Keep it on like so, not spreading germs. Now let's go. So that's it from me.
Well, thank you so much, Louise. I think these were such great ideas. And what I loved is that they were so actionable. Like as a parent, I can leave this webinar today and I have 10 new ideas plus a song that I can share with my little ones. So, and it really struck me as I listened is two things. First, it was the gift of boredom. That boredom for children is a gift because it creates opportunities to find activities that really answer something in you as an individual, and that children have their own preferences. They'll find something. And the other piece that struck me is this idea of the importance of risk as a critical component in play, that actually risk contributes to the joy of play and to what children are learning. And of course, it's safe, age-appropriate risk, but it's fun to do something risky and master it.
Well, we are hampering children's development if we take away the risk.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. In fact, one of my favorite memories as a child is I built my own tree ladder and climbed up a tree. So it was my secret place to go.
Risks are to be managed, not eliminated, because there's risks in life and children need to be able to self-assess the risk. Absolutely.
And we had a really interesting question from a parent who said, you know, with social distancing and sheltering in place, can children do imaginative play on their own? Or do they need to have a play partner? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, if children are used to playing by themselves, and that's the idea, of course they can. Because with in early childhood, we'll set up experiences for one child. And
Mm-hmm.
some children have no idea what to do because they're used to all the bells and whistles, you know, as Heather and Kathy said. However, if you have just a table with just some resources on them, like natural resources or different colors or blocks, then children, you might, as an adult, you start them off if they've never done that before. So what might you do? I might put her over here. I might put this person under here. So it's practice. So the adult has to show, if the child has never experienced that, well, then the adult can start that off. And
So
then
the adult is modeling, yes.
yeah, that's right. And to be fair to yourself, which is what, you know, you've said earlier, that if the child wants to play with you, you can say to the child, well, what I'm going to do, I'm going to be playing with you for an hour, for half an hour or an hour, and then I'm going to do my work. So it's clear limit. And that's how we always worked with the screen as well. That the screen is, you know, at this time, but this is what we do now. So
And I think you're right. Children really thrive. Yeah.
That's right. And you're the parent. You make the rules. When parents, because I do parent seminars in Australia, when parents say, I can't get the iPad away. Now, this is before COVID. I can't get the iPad away. Would you allow the child to eat 40 chocolate biscuits? I can't. Of course not. So it's the same thing. It's you are the adult, you set the rules, and you have to have rules in the house. They're guidelines, they're limits. We have rules about everything else, but it's so hard for parents because screens are in this generation, and it's difficult. However, the children will, my children, I tell you, why are we the most daggiest house? We're not allowed to do this. However, they now as adults are so thankful, and children, their friends remember that we were the family that always played the cards. After dinner, we played cards. I didn't want to. All I wanted to do was have my cigarette, have my drink. However, parenting is hard, and you have to put in to get out what you want. And so cards after dinner from an early age, from 2 and 3, like Skip-Bo, memory, it teaches children to turn take. It teaches, and sometimes a child will be crying because they lost, and you never let a child win. That's about resilience, but you acknowledge that. I know you were really sad tonight when you lost. However, tomorrow night we'll play again. It's not, it's only a game, because it's massive to them.
It's big to them. Yeah. Well, and I feel like you're making a really good point about the safety that children derive from consistent limits and family routines. And I think children really look forward to that. They feel nurtured by that, and it strengthens their bond with you when they know that you're consistent and that they can trust you to, respond in that nurturing way. Our job is not to remove every disappointment from our child's life. Our job is to help them manage those natural disappointments.
Exactly. Life, now, pass the parcel, everyone gets a prize. When did that happen? So children can't deal with disappointment.
And I think the other issue is that our children, we're getting out of our age range for today's talk, but children know, when they haven't won a game, right? They know. So even if they're getting the trophy, it doesn't mean as much to them because they know what their performance was. And I think validating that and talking about that, what could have gone better? What skills would you like to learn? Right? And I think that's what, to your point, building a resilient child, and it starts young and continues across the lifespan of parenting, I think. If my own conversations with my mom are any measure, we continue to seek that from our parents for a long time. So I think we're, thank you, Louise.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
I think we're going to switch to our final speaker, who is Dr. Laura Markham. Dr. Markham has served as a parenting coach with many, many families, and in fact is touching over 150,000 moms and dads on a weekly basis through her coaching posts at ahaparenting.com. Dr. Laura hopes to really support parents, and in so doing nurture healthy development of children across the country and the world. So she is going to be talking with us today about something I know a lot of us are struggling with, which is how to manage those screen use dilemmas that arise, as well as some ideas for parent-child activities. So I know many of us are thinking about these issues at the moment, and I welcome you, Dr. Laura. Oh, I think you're on mute.
You are right. Sorry. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you. I wanted to comment on the question. I loved Louise Dorrit's answer to, can children do imaginative play by themselves? And I wanted to say that's most of what young children do. You know, when your son has two toy engines and they're talking to each other and they're racing each other, that's imaginative play, you know, with his train set. My daughter used to play with her imaginary friend Betsy, and she could play with Betsy for 45 minutes at a time when she was 4 years old. And if I tried to listen, because of course, as a psychologist, I was quite fascinated, she would glare at me and say, Betsy and I are having private discussions. So I think children always are doing imaginative play if we encourage that. You know, screens are a huge experiment because we have never, we haven't had this kind of access to screens for children. And we don't really know what effect it has on brain development, although we're tracking that. And some of this was mentioned earlier. But that doesn't mean as a parent you can't use screens. It does mean, again, as Louise just said, that we do need to set limits around screen use. So that's what I want to talk with you about today. And the first thing I would say is, even before you get to that moment where you have to help them turn the screen off, there's a lot that happens. Maria Montessori famously said, don't control the child, control the environment so the child can thrive. And that's what we want to do here. We want to set up an environment, a context, so the child expects what's going to happen and is more able to go along with it. You know, if you have a schedule that you've decided how much screen time you're going to allow and when you're going to do it in the course of the day, then you're not just defaulting to the easiest thing at that moment. And also your child knows what to expect. It's a consistent schedule. So every minute is not a power struggle about whether a screen is going to happen next. So start by setting a reasonable goal for yourself. What, if you're working at home in the middle of a pandemic, you're going to allow more screen time than you might have otherwise. That's okay. That's completely fine. Decide what you think is reasonable. And some of that time can be educational. We talked about a balanced media diet. Dr. Kevorkian shared this idea of a balanced media diet. It's so important because, you know, maybe you want to let them go to Audible to listen to a free audiobook. There are audiobooks for all age kids. They are in many languages and your child can stream them. That's considered quality time, educational time. And you can even set your child up with markers to listen as they're listening to the story, that they can illustrate it as they go. So you're on a conference call, tell your 3-year-old they get to listen to the story, but you want them to share with you what happened in the story once you get off your call. So here's the crayons, here's the paper, they can draw pictures so they can tell you about the story afterwards. Or maybe you want to go and do one of the daily educational activities at Scholastic. Again, they have them for starting at pre-K, so really at 4 years old. So you can choose some part of that screen diet to be educational, which, given if you're working at home, you're going to have a lot of screen time. You really want as much of that, as much of the screen pie to be something that's more educational as you can. And then, of course, you're going to have some treat time. You're going to have a show that your children really love to watch, and that's okay too. But before kids do that, make a chart with your children of what goes on in the course of your day so that even 3 and 4-year-olds love to see a picture of themselves brushing their teeth, eating their breakfast, getting dressed, and check off their chart. And if you want a child to develop a prefrontal cortex that has good executive function where they can manage themselves through the morning tasks and you don't have to be yelling at kids to get ready or do anything, set them up to be in charge of themselves with a schedule. And then once their checks are there and you've checked it, then they can go and have their screen time. If you have a child 5 or under and you're working at home, you're probably going to have screen time more than once a day. So maybe that's the morning screen time. And in the afternoon, they can have screen time after they've had rest time, after they've had one-on-one time with you. If you have more than one child, maybe one has screen time while the other has one-on-one time. You want to make sure that you've decided the order of the schedule, and they will come to know it just like they do at preschool. And they won't be fighting with you about when you get to have screen time. Another thing that you want to make sure is in your day is free play. And we'll talk in a minute about independent play and how to foster that. But you might start by coming up with a list with your children of activities they like to do. If they're old enough, I love the list of, mud and sand and water, because those sensory activities children love. If you're in a New York City apartment during a pandemic, you can't do that. But what you could do is give your child sensory bags. You can put shaving cream in, you can put rice that you've dyed different colors, or you can do sparkles and bubbles, lots of duct tape, strong Velcro, strong, not Velcro, but sealing bags that seal themselves with lots of duct tape. And you can even give them to babies. And it can keep a child busy for a very long time. And you can take it away at the end of that session or the end of that day, put it away and pull it out again next month, and it's like new. So there are ways that you can give kids these sensory experiences that keep them riveted and also are calming. And that's a way of easing into independent playtime if your child has not been used to it. So all of these things can precede the screen time. And then you want to talk with your child about what they're going to do with the screen. So it works best if you say you can watch one show. You can watch Daniel Tiger, one episode. Now, your child, it's great if you can have a way to just have that one episode that you've recorded and it automatically shuts off afterwards. Otherwise, you have to be on it to be there at the end, because if you've ever binge watched Netflix, you know that as soon as the next thing starts playing, you're mesmerized on the screen. And no child 5 or under has enough brain development to self-regulate at that moment to walk away from the screen. And when you come and interrupt that new episode, they're forgetting the agreement they made with you to get off. So the agreement in advance is, what are you going to watch? You want to watch Daniel Tiger? Okay, that's great. How many shows? We're watching one show this morning, right? And then we're going to have lunch. And this afternoon, after we go outside, we could watch one more show. But right now, one show, right? Now, what if it's hard for you to turn it off? Oh, no, Mommy, I'll turn it off. I love that. But what if it is hard? Sometimes it can be hard to turn off a show when you're done, right? What could we do to make it easier? Now, here's the secret to making it easier. You need a routine. You need some sort of a ritual that your child is used to. So when the show is turned off, the child will absolutely protest, but you go right into what's next on the routine. And it needs to be something the child can move toward with enthusiasm. So preferably time with you. So if you use this show to go do your conference call with your boss or whatever, when you come back and you move them away from the show, they need to have something, like you're going to read with them, you're going to have a snack with them, you're going to do outside time together, something that they enjoy. Or maybe it can still be a screen, but it can be something that is, a kids yoga class or a little exercise class or a family dance party where you put on music. movement is actually super helpful to shift a child away from a screen, because when you're in the trance of the screen, you glaze over, your brain goes into different brain waves where the child is just like in a trance, right? To break that trance, it's very helpful to get them moving. So Family Dance Party is a great way to move kids right into a way to connect with you, move, and it shifts gears because you put on music they love, a song that they love. It's sort of like when the preschool teacher puts on the cleanup song. They know what's next. They hear that music. Yes, it's family dance party time. We always start with this particular song. So make sure you have some sort of a routine or ritual set up. And then you say to your child, what if it's hard for you to stop? I know, family dance party, give me 5. Okay, shake on it. We always keep our promises, right? Now, this doesn't mean your child won't squawk when it's time for the show to go off. But when you come out and you say, morning, it's going to be off in 1 minute, your child's like, no, I'm watching Daniel Tiger. But then when it hits the end of the episode, if you're ready to turn on that dance music, your child is much less likely to go into a tantrum. Now, what if they do tantrum? That's hard, right? You set a limit. Sometimes kids do go into a tantrum, especially if they're not used to that limit. The way you do a limit that works for kids is you start by empathizing. It's so hard to turn it off when you love that show. I know you love that show, didn't you? Then you set the limit. And now it's time to turn off the screen. Now it's the end of the episode. We turn it off. And then you tell your child what they can do instead. This is true for every limit you ever set. 3 steps. You empathize, hard to turn off. You set the limit. Now we're turning off. And then you tell the child what they can do. We're going to dance. And if your child has a meltdown, you just remind yourself that it's a learning process. They won't have the meltdown every day this week. It'll happen the first day, maybe a shorter time the second day. And after that, your child's a quick learner. They're going to get that this is something you're serious about. And they're going to move on to the family dance party. So I wanted to spend just a couple minutes talking about co-viewing. Dr. Kerkorkian mentioned that you can watch shows or anything else on a screen with children, and that they retain significantly more if you do that. If you're working, you're probably not going to be doing that right now, but it's a very important thing to remember because it encourages your child to be an active, engaged media, not just a consumer, but they're doing active viewing and they're engaged with what they're learning on the screen. They're bringing more of their cognitive faculties to bear, and they're developing those cognitive faculties at the same time. So if you're viewing with your child, you're asking questions. You're going to hit pause every so often and say, wow, that's scary, isn't it? Are you scared? I'm a little scared. Or, why do you think he said that? Or you might talk about values. Wow, it looks like they're saying the boy is brave, but the girl isn't brave or strong or whatever they're showing. Do you think girls can be brave and strong too? So just by asking questions, you're helping your child think critically about the media they're consuming. You can also help your child think critically about what they would do in that instance. What would you do? Or should she tell her mom? Or just help your child understand their experiences as they watch. Wow, that must really hurt that child's feelings on the screen. What do you think? So that's co-viewing. And even if you're not doing that much of it right now during the pandemic, important to keep in mind as your child gets older and continues to absorb what they're taking in. Because remember, screens are a very effective teacher. You want to be involved in the lessons your child is getting from screens. The final thing that I want to share with you, and I'll make it pretty brief, is about independent play. As we heard passionately from Louise Dorat, play is so important for children. It's how they learn. And research shows that children who regularly lose themselves in play develop not just academic intelligence, but emotional intelligence. the qualities that will help them master whatever they pursue for the rest of their lives. They develop increased capacity to problem solve, to persevere, to manage frustration, to focus, to use their imagination to create. Play is how children learn, and it's how they discover who they are. It's how they become themselves. So, and I would add, simply from the perspective of living with children, play is what keeps children happy and absorbed, so they aren't whining or fighting with each other. And after they've had a good play session, they're happy. Whereas after they've had a long screen session, well, you ask yourself, what is my child like after they've spent a lot of time on screens? It's different than when they've been playing. So remember that independent play is actually good for your child. Don't feel guilty. If you've just spent some time connecting with your child, which of course every child needs every day, but if you've just spent that quality time with your child, don't feel guilty that you aren't continuing to play with them. Set up structure in your home with places to place, a place to build things, maybe a table so they're able to build something where the 2-year-old won't get at it, their Lego structure. Set up an area for messy play so you won't worry that the sand is getting spilled, or that when they're using art supplies, if they're doing Play-Doh, make sure it stays on a tray. So set up areas in your home, those lovely slides with the box with the teddy bears, set up cozy areas for them, and every day make sure it's clean in the morning, and put out things that will interest your children to spark their curiosity and draw them in. There's so much more we could say about how to foster independent play, but I think my top tip would be the more time they get to play and move through that boredom of wondering, well, what do I do with myself? The more they will find what interests them. And what can really help here is for you to get your child started on something and then to gradually move yourself away. I have to quickly check that email from my boss. I'll be right back. And you'll be amazed once you get them started how they take that ball and run with it, because children are designed to play. That's their job in life.
Thank you so much. I really appreciated that, Laura. And in fact, you already have answered one of our questions, which is, how do we get children involved in play in the same space while the parent is working? And so this idea of engaging a child in an activity and then gradually phasing yourself out is such a good one for parents. I think I really also resonated to this idea of a schedule where we create rituals for transitioning, these intentional rituals for transitioning, and that we transition from a highly preferred activity for many children, which is screens, to another highly preferred activity, right? We would never want to transition from screens to a worksheet or something, because that is not a fun transition for children. But to go from one preferred activity to another, I think is a great tip for parents, and may not have naturally occurred to me. So thank you so much for helping us all get a little bit of work done these days. And I think we did get a question in about facilitating play among children who are different ages. So do you have thoughts about helping a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old who are siblings, play, because they're really at different stages?
Yeah. That's so common, obviously.
Yeah.
Most people don't have twins. And so they're trying to work that out. And I would say, try to find activities that can be done by each child, not quite together, more like parallel play. So if you're giving them clay, they can each use the clay to do what they want to do with it, but they don't have to actually engage. You're not going to expect the 3-year-old to be at the same level as the 5-year-old. Maybe they both want to make monsters, but they can still make different monsters at different levels.
Right.
I will say that 5-year-olds and 4-year-olds love to play with someone else, and they might be willing to put up with the 3-year-old not being quite the perfect play partner, just so that they can have some playtime. But of course, that's hard when you're on a conference call to have your 5-year-old running in saying, "Mom,
Right.
he doesn't know how to do this," right? And often you'll have to help them negotiate in advance of the game. Oh, you want to play store. Oh,
Mhm.
and you want to play astronaut. This is a tough situation. How will you decide what to do? And you might have to help them decide that they're going to have a
Yeah.
store on the moon.
Yeah.
And so the astronaut, your 5-year-old can be the astronaut while the 3 or 4-year-old is busy setting up the store on the moon.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I do have to say, though, one of the benefits of us all working at home is having children drop into Zoom meetings. It has been the upside of being on Zoom a lot from home. But yeah, I think that's a great idea. And you're absolutely right. The older children will tolerate younger ones just to have the pleasure of engaging. So thank you. And next we'll be talking through, maybe we'll just take one last question before we transition. And we have a question about how do we create these messages for parents about their own screen use. So do any of you have thoughts, or maybe I'll take one sentence of tips from each of you, because we heard from a number of folks who were just wondering, how do we raise this issue of parents' screen use? And I think they're referring to screen use that's not related to work roles, but more the entertainment screen use that we all are pulled into at times. Would anyone like to take that?
I'll give you one line.
Great.
You're the role model.
Yes. So yes, the parent is the role model. Very helpful. I believe that's very true. My own kids are shocked. Yeah, go ahead, Louise.
Well, adults need rules as well. So if we have the rule that no screen, like when they're older and teenage, no devices after 6, or no devices at the table, or
Yes.
you know, we have, and it's hard for us because it's on our hip now, isn't it?
Right.
So we have to be really conscious. We don't take it with us to a walk when we're walking with the children. Yeah, it has to be an intentional act.
And I think that's so important, because I'll say when I'm talking to one of my kids and my phone dings that I've had a text message, they are so conditioned to immediately check it, and I'll say, no, it'll wait. I'm focused on you right now.
And keep it on silent, unless
yes, and
your partner's
keep it on silent.
expecting a baby or something.
Right.
Keep it on silent.
Absolutely. Heather, do you want to have the final word from the research perspective?
Sure, I'd love to. So I would echo what's already been said for sure, and also add that it doesn't have to be 100% of the time. So it's more practical for parents to focus on carving out those special times in the day for screen-free, focused, high-quality interactions, rather than feeling guilty anytime their phone gets caught in their hand.
Right, absolutely. Well, thank you. And I think that's great guidance that'll help all of us approach this summer with a sense of balance and a whole toolbox full of strategies for managing these screen questions that arise with our children. I just very much appreciate how you each shared your expertise so generously this afternoon. And now I'd like to ask the founder and president of Children and Screens, Dr. Pamela Hurst Della Pietro, to close us out today. Oh, I think you're on mute, Dr. Della Pietro.
Thanks. Thank you all for coming and for your excellent questions. And thank you, Rebecca, Kathy, Laura, and Louise, Heather, for a terrific panel and for so many useful tips and so much insight and advice for parents. The conversation will continue on Friday with a webinar moderated by Dr. David Hill, former chairman of the American Academy of Pediatrics' Media Committee, with a dynamic panel packed with ideas for parenting school-age children this summer. On Monday, June 8th, Dr. Robert Bilder, director of the Tenenbaum Center for the Biology of Creativity at UCLA, will lead a fascinating workshop about teens and screens during the summer of COVID-19. Sorry, I couldn't miss that rhyming opportunity. We hope that you'll join us both Friday and Monday, and please share the YouTube video you'll receive of today's workshop with your fellow parents, teachers, clinicians, researchers, and friends. I'm sure they'll appreciate it. When you leave the workshop, you'll see a link to a short survey. Please click on the link and let us know what you thought of the workshop. Thanks again, and everyone stay safe and well.